Welcome to the Ministry Central Leadership Podcast. Ministry Central is the official United Pentecostal Church International online resource designed to develop and enhance your ministry. Through the teaching and wisdom of experienced apostolic leaders, Ministry Central will equip you to pursue the call of God on your life. In this podcast, you will learn important principles, concepts, and ideas from apostolic leaders who are on the front lines of ministry, making a difference in their leadership and calling. I'm your host, Darren Sargent, and this is the Ministry Central Leadership Podcast. Thanks for joining. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Ministry Central Leadership Podcast, and today I am super excited to have my good friend, Kenneth Stewart, in the studio with us today. Kenneth, we go way back.
We probably shouldn't tell them how far back.
Well,
I know how old
at least
we are.
in the Stone Ages.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they had running water back then other than just brooks. Or
that's it.
1987, I showed up on the Christian Life College campus, and you were I think you were a junior.
Yes, I would have been. Yeah.
You graduated in
89.
89.
Yeah, so
All
I
right.
had a good memory.
Yeah, well, you know, some of
You're
us.
not that old.
Yeah, I'm not as old as some of us. But Brother Stewart serves as our North American Missions Director of Promotions. Tremendous friend, incredible leader, tremendous communicator, and it's just good to have you on the podcast today.
Appreciate
so
what you do at Ministry Central.
now I want to kind of go back. Let's go
Yes.
back. So when you came to Bible college, you would have come in 1985.
That is correct.
Okay. Did you come straight from the mission field?
Straight from the mission. 18
Okay.
years old, straight from Liberia, West Africa. I think a lot of times people ask me, knowing that my family's from Florida, why did you go to school in California? But at that time, any school in America, my family would have been thousands of miles away. So
it didn't matter.
California or any other state didn't matter.
Yeah. Now, I can remember, we were only in school together for a couple of years, but I often go back to that time from 87 to 91 for me, for 85 to 89 for you.
Yes.
The influence of that church
No doubt.
and the leadership of Brother
No doubt about
Haney.
that. No doubt.
Talk a little bit about that in your words. What was the influence? You came from the mission field.
I did,
So
yes.
your experience, I come from Podunk, Idaho.
Yeah.
Okay, southern Idaho. So anything of that magnitude was much, much larger
Yes,
than
yeah.
anything. So maybe speak to that and how it influenced you.
Well, I think, first of all, I
early
think
leader.
on a personal level, I think my time at COC, I feel like you never know what could have happened, but I feel like if I'm not going to COC, that I would still be in church somewhere, serving in a service, serving in some sort of capacity. But I had no desire to go into ministry. In my mind, ministers were poor and came from a family on the mission field with 9 kids. I was like, I'm going to be an attorney, nothing against a professional career, but it wasn't my calling, I knew. But I was running from my calling. So my time at COC really reaffirmed my commitment to ministry. And then the second thing it did, Brother Haney was such a visionary. He was talking about building this church to hold 6,000 people. And our movement at that time, no one thought about that. Big church was 200 or 300 people. No one thought like him. And just being there and being part of that vision it was very much so. So that's, I think going there just solidified my walk with God, my calling to ministry, and increased my vision to think, man, anything is possible.
And Brother Haney had the ability to do that.
He did, yeah.
That church during those years of the 80s was in pretty incredible revival.
Yeah, they were.
I can remember some amazing services. It was a great place to kind of just, for me, like I said, I come from a very small district, smaller church.
Yes.
And when I got there to see the expanse.
No doubt. See that
and the vision that this church put into our hearts. From that, I loved his pastoral leadership class.
No doubt.
When he was there.
Yeah. No, definitely so. But I think, one thing I remember about that time too, I remember that when I was there, the church was growing by hundreds of people. But I think one thing even impacted me now in my work with North American Missions, way back then, Brother Haney was talking about points of lights and daughter works in the community. He had about 20 of them that started over various areas around that Stockton area. Just a few weeks ago, I was back in California. Actually, I was in Sonora speaking for the men's conference for the church there for CLC. And they're in Sonora, almost 2 hours away from Stockton. I met the pastor, and he was a point of light that was sent out in the mid 80s when
Is
I
the
was
pastor
there.
Mike Moore?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Moore, yes. And he
was from Idaho.
Yeah, but he was a point of light sent out back then by Kenneth Haney, and he's still in Sonora.
Wow.
With an apostolic church.
Wow.
So it just brought it home again that he was a visionary, not just to build an amazing church in Stockton, but he had that vision of building that network of churches that would impact for hundreds of miles around Stockton, California.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I told you it was kind of be off the cuff questions here,
no
but
problem.
With that in regard, not just Brother Haney. I mean, we're going to talk later about your different influences in your life, but talk to me about the importance of, you're working weekly.
Yes.
With church plants.
That is great.
In your opinion, how important is that initial influence of someone like a Brother Haney, someone like a Brother Bernard, someone like, an Anthony Mangan? I could go down the list. How important is that to the success of a church plant or a church planter?
It's vital, because I think in any new endeavor, the trajectory you start with determines where you end up. So if you start out at like a 15% incline and and that's your vision, that's your dream, you're never going to achieve. But if you start out kind of running wide open, believing God, almost a 90-degree angle going straight up, even if you achieve 45 degrees, you do some amazing things. We as human beings are limited by our exposure.
Sure.
We're limited by our experiences. We're limited sometimes by our resources and our thought patterns.
Yeah.
So being exposed to someone that has been there, someone that could mentor you, someone that has a bigger vision than you, impacts you in a way to believe for great things that you never would have thought possible on your own.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of when I see people that are not connected, to someone, a pastor or a mentor, someone that can help them with that vision, I think they flounder because they're depending upon their own ideas and vision only, which can limit what God can do through them.
I was, as you were talking about it, years ago, the concept of a church plant is, a family just got in a U-Haul or got in a station wagon, packed it up, moved to a city, and just cut it out. Built that without any support, without any help. Well, that's shifted now. We are in an age where we're really talking about teams going about the support. In your opinion, some of that pioneer, let me speak for myself. Some of that pioneer mentality, these guys just did it.
Yes.
And I know times have changed.
Yes.
But how important is it? And you can talk maybe about launch with this.
Yes.
How important is it, that team concept or that sending concept instead of, responding to a call at a general conference or a conference and I'm going to a city.
Well, what's interesting about that is we've come up with a lot of great programs at NAM the last years that we think are just revolutionary. Launch being one that came in under Jimmy Toney.
Yeah.
Then we're doing a better job. We're trying to recapture some of the history of NAM, and much to our surprise, we're finding out these perhaps may not be new concepts. They were there and we got away from. Give you a good example, launch. We talk about going to a city, building relationship, establishing a team. I came across a quote from Jack Yance just the other day where he says, if you're going to go out and plant a church, don't have a service for 12 months. Go into the city.
So he was already thinking this way.
I'm like, we're thinking. And then, another thing that I think you talk about that pioneer spirit.
Yeah.
I've talked to, matter of fact, Doug Davis Sr. in New York. I talked to him. In the early 70s, UPC had a program called Tent Makers. And they would literally advertise in the Pentecostal Herald and say, these are the church planners starting, this month or this year coming up. These are their needs. Is there anyone that will go help them establish this church? And he tells a story about when he started there on Long Island, he didn't have anyone. And a young lady was graduating from Bible college, read the article in the Pentecostal Herald and moved from Texas to New York. And not for her. She was the first Sunday school teacher. She was the first,
That's amazing.
And so stayed there 50 years. And he said, we couldn't build the church. And then she got married and her husband helped them. And so it's kind of interesting, some of the ideas that we are trying to bring and people look at it and say, well, that's a different way. And I think we lost a lot of years with that parachute Lone Ranger model. I think we lost some good people. Now, some people may not have had the right motive. Some people, weren't as committed to doctrine as should again. But some people, we just burned them out. And in the process,
I would agree.
We kill their ministries, we kill their marriages, and they never recovered from it. And so, my wife and I, we planted a church in Tampa, Florida. We started with just, my wife and I and our 3 girls, 3 young daughters. That's all we had.
Yeah.
And the church is still there today.
What year did you start that?
We started that in 2006.
Okay.
2006, we started that church.
It's still for the thriving.
Yeah, still thriving, doing well. And so I know we've done it. So don't, those listening say, hey, I did it. We did it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I don't want anyone else to go through what my family went through, what my girls went through, my wife went through, digging that church. I thank God that we were able to do it.
Sure.
And if you don't have anyone else, and God will equip you, God will keep you. So I'm not trying to minimize the fact that God will equip you and keep what he's called you to do. But as the church as a whole, the mission is for all of us. So how can we work together to achieve the Great Commission in North America?
I think personally, I was involved in the origination of the launch program when it started. Brother Tony was director, and he brought several of us in, and we kind of talked it over and was able to kind of be a part of that for a few years. So enjoyed it. The launch program to me is probably one of the greatest things.
I agree. No doubt about that.
That has been put into the system.
Yes.
And maybe for those that maybe aren't familiar with launch, maybe explain a little bit about what it is, just so people can understand.
Well, launch is a 2.5-day class we hold every March. It's a 2.5-day course. You have about 10 hours of pre-work. What makes a launch different is launch is inspiration, but it's also practical teaching.
Very practical.
We have a lot of conferences and we need them. Focus strictly on inspiration. But if you're going to play in a church, you need to hear from people that have done it. Yeah. And you know what pitfalls and things to, like the best lesson at launch.
It pushes people years ahead.
It does, no doubt. I wish I had launch when I started.
Oh, man.
Scott Sisteron's class on foundational family.
I was just going to talk about that. That's an incredible class.
And the need to develop foundational families as a foundation in the core. Second thing, I was named director in Florida for 9 years. Okay. But about halfway in, I had to apologize to my church planners. And I said, listen, I've been pushing to have a good church. I'm not going to push you to have good systems. My whole emphasis initially is that, hey, let's get music. We're going to have a thriving. Don't get me wrong. I believe in that thriving and powerful apostolic service. But as a church man, you have good systems of record keeping and follow up.
So good.
And I said, if I can teach you to have good systems, along with having good church, you're going to build an apostolic church. Without good systems, it's not going to happen.
One of the things that, one of the reasons I really wanted you to be on this podcast today is to talk a little bit about launch, because we've put pre-launch, the launch button is all on Ministry Central.
It is.
And it's all free.
It's all free.
And I would tell everyone that's watching this or listening to this today, if you're not watching, it is on YouTube. I'll give all that information on YouTube. But that Foundational Families by Brother Sistrunk,
no doubt,
is one of the most incredible
it is, no doubt, lessons
on building people in a church and the importance of those foundational. In my opinion, every pastor ought to watch it.
No matter the age of the church, I was going to say that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's one thing I love about Ministry Central, is that the tools are there to equip your local church. And even if you aren't currently looking at planning a church, the principles that we have the North American Missions page on the pre-launch work, and then the new one is the launch button. It's a one-button solution to take you phase by phase through growing a church.
And it's incredible. And it continues to grow.
It does.
We're continuing to add content on there. So if you want to know more about this, we'll put it in the show notes, but also just want to tell you, go to ministrycentral.com, push on the NAM button in the course catalog. It'll take you to the NAM page. There's a video that you need to watch by Brother Sistrunk right on the top of the page, but also go to the launch button and just go through those. Find foundational families. You teach something on there. I can't remember which one it is.
I do one on bivocational pastoring.
Oh, tremendous. Because you had to do that.
Yeah. The entire time I pastored, I was bivocational.
That's great. Let's talk about that, because I think that's an important concept, because probably a lot of people listening or watching this are like, we're doing that. We're doing, but talk to that a minute.
Well, it's kind of interesting. When I pastored, people would ask me, are you full-time in ministry? And I would say, yes. I wasn't trying to be facetious or lie to them. I looked at my job, even when I worked in the corporate world or when I had my own business as being part of my ministry. My God, I believe the Bible says, take up your cross daily and follow me. I have one cross.
Yeah.
So I don't wear one hat as a pastor, one as a business owner, one as an employee. It's all part of my walk with God, ministry with God. So I viewed my work as a, as part of my ministry. Now, I do believe in full-time ministry because for one reason, even you go to get a loan, one thing the bank's going to look at and say, hey, is there an executive here that's can support? Because if they know if something happens to that founding pastor who's bivocational, nobody's going to come take the church potentially from the bank's point of view. Personally, my goal was I was always going to be working bivocational, but we started hiring full-time staff in the church. So I think there's a couple ways you can look at it as the church grows. But for me, every contact I made, Bible studies I taught came through my work. And involved.
You had that connection with the community.
That's exactly it. And getting involved in the community and getting to know. And so business donations, we had major donations come to the church to even help us survive financially through people I met, through my work and through my business. So I think what we have to get away from is looking at bivocational ministry as just added stress and added, look as part of your ministry.
Yeah.
Granted, you're not going to your church maybe 5 days a week like you would like to, but don't view that job as anything but a chance to minister.
That's true.
And as an extension of the ministry that God has called you. But it does teach you, time management. Mm-hmm. But it's busy people that get things done. So even though it's difficult.
You want to get something done, find a busy person.
That's what you got to do. And so you have a family to take care of, and you got to align your life with the proper values. We say all the time, God first, marriage, family, and then, ministry. But a lot of times we revert that and have ministry at the top.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Your family, if you put the right values in place, your family won't suffer and your church won't suffer and your job won't suffer because you're working on the right priority list, and that keeps it all in balance.
Great advice. Let's switch gears here for a moment as we kind of maybe start ramping down on this. Talk to me about early influences in your life and ministry.
Yes.
We've already mentioned Brother Haney, but I'm sure there's more. And then fast track to where we are now. Okay. And I want to hear the influences now, because we all should be getting influenced.
Yes.
I know I'm probably one of them.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course. You're top on the list for me. No, actually, you say that jokingly, but I think that having peers that are doing good is an influence too.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
You and I work together here at headquarters, but knowing each other since 1987, it's good to have friends. And I have friends I still look up to, and I have friends that I get advice, and I have friends that are peers. So I think for me, what's important to me, you should always have someone who's ahead of you in life, has done more, that you look up to, that you reach up to.
Yes.
To have peers that are more or less on the same level that can also be an influence in your life and speak into your life. And then you have people you're reaching back to help lift up. So that's very vital to me.
I would say we always need to have a hand.
An extra hand if we can.
Moving forward, one reaching back. I'm trying my best here.
We can grab onto your arm there. But of course, early in life, my father being my first pastor and growing up in a missionary home, my father was a great influence on me, and my pastor in Panama City, Alan Crabtree, still is a great influence, in my life. And then when we moved to Tampa, I was about 6 hours away. My father was overseas from me, and and I went to James Wolfe there in Tampa. I want you to be my pastor, because even though I still consider Alan Crabtree my pastor, he was over 300 miles away. And I believe a pastor should be someone who can look you in the eyeballs. This might be controversial to say, but when I meet people and they're only pastors halfway across the country, I'm like, there's no accountability. They don't know what's going on in your life. Yeah. And I told Brother Wolf, I said, you know what? I'm giving my wife permission to call you if I'm working too much or anything is out of balance. And over the years, especially early in our marriage, Brother Wolf, she took liberty of that. I get a call from Brother Wolf, say, your wife called. Can we meet?
Can we talk?
So if you don't have someone in your life that can call you in.
I did something, this is kind of off the subject, but it stays there, but kind of veers a little bit. When my children were growing up, I desperately wanted to be dad.
Yes.
And I remember specifically when I did this with my son, he had just gone to the youth group and took him to someplace special to eat, brought the children's pastor we had at that time, brought his youth pastor we had at that time. And I wrote him a letter. We ate good. I think we went to Ruth's Chris or something that. It was a special. I made it special and had each of them speak into his life. And it was a powerful moment. But I told him, I said, I called his name, Carson. I said, here are a list of 5 men that I trust.
That's
that
awesome.
If you have an issue that you feel like you can't talk to Dad, who's your pastor, that we were pastor in the church at the time, I said, I give you permission to talk to them.
That's awesome.
And I said, they know that they're selected. And they also know that they won't divulge anything unless it's a sin issue, it's a life issue that I need to be, my wife and I need to be with. And I think that's important, that proximity that you talk about, because sometimes we can say, oh yeah, that's my pastor, but we're never engaged.
No, don't know what's going on. Can't look in the eyeballs. Because when you have a real mentor pastor in your life, they see they see you at church, they can look at you and tell something's off, you're out of balance. And so many people, they stray so far away out of balance, they don't even realize where they are until it's too late. So I think that's very, very, extremely. David, the psalmist, gave Nathan access to his life. And he was able to point his finger. We all need somebody that'll point their finger in our face. And do that.
And say, you're the man.
It's you. You got to do that.
Well, man, this has just been, I think, an excellent podcast. And I think we're going to have to do a follow-up.
Well, I would love to do that.
I think we can keep on talking and talking and talking. But to all those that are out there, I just want to say how much I appreciate you're listening and watching. Before we close it down, I'm just going to ask one more question of Brother Stewart. If you were sitting at a table with a young minister just starting out, maybe just graduating from Bible college or launching a church, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you would tell them?
It's kind of interesting. When I've had a chance to talk to a young minister or a recent, Bible college grad, first thing I always tell them is one thing that Bible school or no one ever prepared me for, it's what happens when you fall. And the Bible says, rejoice not against me, O my enemy, when I fall, I shall arise. And nothing prepared me for some of the curveballs life throws at you. And I think what defines you is get back up when you fall. My wife and I have been married, 32 years this year. And, we thank God, for our, beautiful granddaughter, that we have.
Oh yes, Nora's kind of
talk about it all the time. But before we had Nora, our first would have been grandson. He died in his mother's womb, and going through that, 2019, I lost my 40-year-old brother in a tragic death, and so those are probably 2 events that probably impacted me personally the most. My would have been my grandson and my brother, and but knowing that tough times are going to come, but God's going to be faithful and get back up again. I think that sometimes some people have some things happen to them and they don't know that it's just part of life. Just gotta, when you fall, just get back up. I shall arise. He made that proclamation, and then I think secondly, I always try to tell them is do the best you can with everything you do. We live in a world too many people just put in half an effort, be mediocre. And I believe being excellent,
Absolutely.
And I tell them all the time, plan to be the best husband you could be, the best father. If you work a job, let God lead you, make the most money you can make, let God be creative. You have a business, let God lead you and guide you. Don't limit what God can do in your life. And, and having that vision of, being the best that you can be. And the third thing I think that I talk a lot about is that iceberg effect. Sometimes we live in a world that gets very superficial, what you see above the surface. 80% of the iceberg is below the surface. And that's where most of our people.
Social media has played such a negative.
It has been. There's that fakeness in that.
We play to the light.
We do. And so, but what's happening beneath the surface, because 90% of your ministry is developed not behind the pulpit.
It's the truth.
And so being a person of integrity, and keeping your walk with God straight and not allowing external influence to take you off that course, having that vision and, and getting back up again and trusting God. And there's going to be twists and turns and look like detours and setbacks. But I tell you what, if you keep following God and trusting God, God will take you places you can't imagine, open doors you can never see.
That's so true.
And you'll be in places, you'll be surprised where God will lead you. As a matter of fact, if he showed you where you were going to go, you wouldn't trust him to follow him.
Ain't that the truth?
You'd be scared.
I don't know about you, but that last 3 or 4 minutes was worth this podcast. And I would encourage you to share this, subscribe, wherever you're listening to your podcast, watching it on YouTube. We'll put all the details in the show notes. God bless. Thanks again, Brother Stewart. I so enjoyed this.
Thank you very much.
I would call you what I usually call you, but since we're on official, we got to, I really want apostle. God bless everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the Ministry Central Leadership Podcast. To learn more, visit us at ministrycentral.com and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please take a moment, help us by sharing and subscribing to this podcast. May God richly bless you. We will see you in the next episode of the Ministry Central Leadership Podcast.